All right, hello everyone. Welcome to episode number 70 of Going Live with Good Soil, the day after Halloween. Matt and I were just touching base. We both got a lot of kids. We were out last night. Did you have a lot of candy last night? Usually, last few years I've abstained from candy, but last night I ended up eating a good amount. I just had a craving for a Butterfinger bar, and one of the houses was giving out adult-sized Butterfinger bars. I just chomped that up, and then I was off to the races. Now I'm like have a hangover of sugar today. Did you eat much
Yeah,
candy last
that's
night?
I probably ate like I don't know 5 or 6 of those little mini pieces. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's probably more than I should have. But
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
There's no keto candies. Isn't that like the worst thing you can
No, there
have? Is
is. There
oh, there
is,
is.
like, all
Okay.
kinds of, like, artificial sweetener, but the artificial sweetener keto stuff, I don't really buy into that. Like, I went through a phase of trying and eating some of that stuff, and I'm not sure it's that healthy for you. I think, all the artificial sweeteners, so but, there is no one passes out keto candy, that's for sure. Yeah.
So the Butterfinger certainly does not count. That kind of went against the whole
Yeah.
goal of the diet.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, at my house, we were passing out little Halloween packets of Pokemon cards. Each one was like 2 or 3 cards. A lot of the
Oh,
kids liked it. My kids picked that out, of course, to pass out, and they get to keep all the leftover Pokemon cards now. So,
smart. Yeah,
you
it's funny.
guys
That was
pass
the
out? What
thing
do you guys
when
pass
I
out?
was a kid, and my kids still do that. It's just crazy how like that's one of the trends that seemed like it was a fad, but it's just still a thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big thing. What did you give it guys pass out? What candy of choice? I'm curious. I
So
would
for
guess wait,
my
let me guess.
all right,
I'm gonna guess, I'm gonna guess, either black licorice or almond joy.
black licorice or almond joy? No,
I don't
yeah.
know.
So we did like a
What is it?
little sampler pack. So
Okay,
one of my
good.
sons has food allergies to a lot of stuff. So like Sour Patch Kids is like one of the candies that he can eat. So we did like
Okay.
a pack of that so he could have the leftovers, and then just like a mixed pack of like Reese's and Hershey's and that sort of thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
we're somewhat traditional.
Okay. All right, well, enough small talk. We got enough people signed in or joined now. We do this live on our YouTube channel and Spaces at the same time. The outline is we go over macro market stuff and then Twitter, Tesla, Elon stuff today, and then talk about some interesting experiences you had over the weekend with a special guest you had. We'll talk about that and some Q&A and stuff. So first, macro market tomorrow, right? Is that the big day? Are they announcing tomorrow? I guess the Federal
Yeah, I think
Reserve
they announced
the
in the
rate
morning
increase.
the overnight rate. Yeah, so I think the market's expecting 75 basis points. I hadn't seen the latest kind of probabilities of where they are.
It's very
Maybe
high
in
probability for 75 tomorrow. Yeah, it's got to
yeah,
be over 80%. I wouldn't be surprised if it's over 90% at this point for 75 basis points tomorrow.
that sounds about right. Last I heard, there was like a 15% chance of 100, but I kind of think that may have gone down a little bit. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where it goes. I kind of think it's going to be a nothing burger, but I don't know. We'll see.
Hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
think the market
Everyone's
moves one way or another? Like if it's just 75, it seems like there's always volatility no matter what.
Yeah. I was reading some financial media from it was either the Wall Street Journal reports or it was like some Bloomberg Business Week or something, but suggesting that the market could have like the biggest up day in years tomorrow or one of the worst down days in the year tomorrow, depending which language the Fed releases about a potential pivot or not, right? Because it's all about the
Yeah.
language for
Yeah.
the future rate increases at this point. We all know what's happening tomorrow. They've done a good job signaling that, but now they have to signal what's next. Is it going to be 75 basis points again, or is it going to be the doors open between 75 or 50, or is it going to be they're pretty sure going to go down to 50 basis points next time? Or are they going to let it's like they have to signal something, and that's what the market's hanging on. So, like the speculation is, depending which way they signal, it depends which way the market interprets it. Is it a pivot? Are we getting to a actual pivot of the market of the Fed where they're going to start increasing rates at a lower speed? They're slowing down the acceleration. Where we have like a terminal rate. We're close to a terminal rate now, um, or not. And
Yeah.
so it seems
It-
like there could be a big move tomorrow based on what I've read. But also that's sensational media and finance. They want you to click on it and see, wow, there's gonna be a 5 or 10% move in the markets. Let's see why. I'll read this.
yeah. And it seems like a lot of times when there's these predictions of like massive volatility days, a lot of times it's like flat, or maybe it's
Yeah.
like volatile in the morning and then it kind of
Yeah.
reverts back to the mean. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I could certainly see, like, if there's a significant tone shift, then absolutely I could see skewing to the upside in particular. You know, I think the market's already expecting a lot of continued rate hikes into next year. So I think the only way it'd be like a huge downshift is if they say, inflation is not getting under control to the extent that we would like, so we need to continue, like, very kind of strong language of like no end in sight. I think if that were to be the case, yeah, that could certainly send markets into a spiral. So it should be
Hmm.
fun either
Yeah,
way.
no, it should be fun. Yeah, it should be fun. And I just want to get it behind us. And just I kind of want to fast forward like to 6 months or a year from now, where the interest rate environment is stable and not every, hopefully by then we're not hanging on every word of every Fed meeting to decide which way all the stocks are going. There's so much passive index investing that's came into style in the last decade with investing overall, that I feel like the macro markets are huge. These interest rate increases drive the people allocating to the indexes more than ever before. And so it's just all the stocks are either moving up at the same time or they're all moving down at the same time. It's a weird environment to be in. And I just I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I, we said many times, we kind of like to think of ourselves as focused on individual company fundamentals and that sort of thing, or long-term growth story rather than macro market. It's very, like, you as an investor, you have to be aware of what's going on there, but it's so hard to actually play that right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to get back to a point where macro is neutral and you're kind of picking who are going to be the relative winners and losers. Because
Yeah.
you're right, it just seems like right now everything's just super highly correlated. It's like the good stocks are only down 40%, and
Yeah.
the bad ones are
Yeah.
down 80. It's like, okay, well, everyone's still a loser in that environment. So,
Yeah.
picking the winning stock it doesn't feel so great in that environment.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, so yeah, I mean, the really big news, I would say, I mean, other than the macro market, there's nothing. I mean, really, tomorrow is the big day for the macro market. But the really big news is the Elon moving into Twitter and setting up like a war room with David Sachs and Jason Calcanis and the guy from Andreessen Horowitz, and they're just really like going to town, like, and they're really trying to make some changes quick, right? I mean, there was like that
Yeah.
notice, like what was it, like Twitter employees have 7 days to figure out like a verification check mark or they're going to be fired. Or I saw some rumor about that. I don't know
I
how
think that
true
was a
that is.
rumor. I don't think
Yeah.
that was an actual
True
true
ultimatum.
thing, especially
Yeah.
given, like Elon's back and forth with Stephen King this morning of,
Yeah,
he
I saw
it seems
that.
like he's trying to figure out a way to do that. I don't think he necessarily had
Yeah.
an ultimatum of it needs to be in place in 7 days. I think
Yeah.
that upset a lot of people for sure.
Yeah,
So
that did. That
I
did.
think they want to be careful about how they implement that and roll it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's really this is an exciting time, an exciting transition time for me to witness with Twitter here. I mean, it could fall either way. I mean, there's a lot of scrutiny. There's so much scrutiny Elon is under at the moment. Like every
Yeah.
other major news publication is publishing articles about, you know, Elon being the antichrist with too much control. I don't know, and like it's just Washington Post is putting some pretty crazy things out about taking quotes from all kinds of like government officials that you can get quotes from anyone who doesn't like Elon and just mix match them together and like create any narrative that's negative you want about Elon and taking over. It's crazy. It's like the art of persuading people by some of these journalists. They're pretty good at it. They've been doing it for a long time, and unfortunately a lot of mom and pop people at home that just read newspapers for informing their opinions and views of the world are reading this stuff, and they don't really get to look closer in at what's actually happening at the sources. So it's like there's a lot of narratives that are trying to spin this in a very negative way, unfortunately. And so I don't know how far that can go. Do you think that can really ruin some of this, or what do you think, Matt? I mean, he's always been subjected to that, right? But now it seems like
Yeah.
another level.
I mean, it's kind of like that one tweet he said where he's seen so many of these like hero villain cycles that it's like hard to keep track anymore. And
Yeah.
it does seem like this is certainly going to add some gas to the flames of that whole debate. my sense is it's probably going to settle down in 2 months or so. Like people are
Yeah.
gonna. I remember it being like kind of a big deal when Bezos bought the Washington Post too. It's like, oh, like now it's going to be
Yeah.
just like the puppet mouth or mouthpiece for for Amazon. And I think people don't really have that view anymore. And he still gets
Yeah.
criticized for that every once in a while.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think the same thing's going to happen here. Probably it'll be a little bit more vocal just because Elon is more polarizing than Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
So I do kind of suspect that it'll be a little bit more insidious or persistent, but I don't think there's going to be anything serious coming out of it. I think 2-3 months from now, people are just going to realize that they like tweeting, and there's like this whole thing with the hate speech that like Elon took over, and all of a sudden like use of the N-word was up like 500%. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that wasn't some new corporate policy, like it was an attack vector, like he said.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Or like there's like calls to investigate. I think Chris Murphy, the Democratic senator from Connecticut or something, said he's initiating a call. He's trying to get a committee together to investigate Saudi Arabia's ownership in Twitter, although they've been an owner of Twitter all along. Like, it's like,
yeah.
it's just excuses for politicians in a lot of ways to virtue signal and try to generate, get their base energized right before elections, which is in a few
Yeah.
days. Yeah. So
Yeah, that timing of it is actually kind of interesting. But I think, I mean, he was really wise, I think, not to change anything or like reinstate Trump right away or anything like that.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, let's take our time and figure out the right way to do this.
Yeah.
And I think if he's, going to accomplish what he set out to do, which is to create, an actual public town square where, there's something of a balance back and forth, and people can kind of choose the level of controversy they want to see in their feeds.
Yeah.
Like nobody's really going to be against that. It's going to be very hard to kind of criticize Elon for, I like being a far right wing politician or something like that when, if he really is successful in kind of balancing both the left and the right. So I think it'll all blow over because he's going to implement this successfully. But there's a bit of risk here, I think.
I wouldn't be surprised if like there's so much controversy. He's becoming such a bigger and bigger figure in society that everything he does is going to be turned into articles and sensationalist clickbait journal. Like I saw some headline like Dogecoin rises rapidly after Elon tweets picture of his dog, Shiba Inu dog or something, and like he might have just been tweeting a picture of his dog, not trying to like signify anything to Dogecoin, but now like it, people will call in the SEC like Elon's manipulating crypto markets by tweeting pictures of dogs or of his pet, everything he does like is going to trigger so many people. Like, I don't know, Hillary Clinton posted some crazy kind of, in my mind, a crazy like a judgment political tweet about the, horrible, incident assault that Nancy Pelosi's husband went through, and she's like, yeah, this is the Republicans caused this. It was basically like blaming Republicans for doing this and we have to stop them or something. I don't know. And Elon just tweeted back like in response, like, hey, it's this tiny chance. He's saying tiny chance. He's not saying there is. He's just saying, hey, you never know. Like we have to investigate things more. There's a tiny chance there's more to this story, and it doesn't mean he's saying there is, but so it triggered so many people. I actually started looking into it because of that. And I was like, wow, this guy, Paul Pelosi is not an innocent angel. He had like a crazy DUI. He's 82 years old and he like could have killed people just like a few months ago, driving like heavily intoxicated. And, I looked at the video of it and like, and there's just lots of red flags with the guy. It doesn't mean he didn't get assaulted, right? But it means like, maybe things should be investigated a little more before we have judgment on things, and it just triggered so many people that I even like said like, hey, what's going on? Like, does anyone know? I'm just trying to investigate with the Twitterverse. Like, does anyone know the background of this guy more? Like, and people just get so upset. Anything political and everything he does that can be perceived as political is going to trigger so many one half of the population one way or the other, and it's going to be there's going to be like, I don't know. He's going to need a heavier security team than he has now, I think.
Yeah. So the Paul Pelosi tweet was kind of interesting in my mind because it wasn't just like all the people on the left got upset with him. I think there were a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that were, essentially thinking, oh, you're getting like that down into the muck where you shouldn't be. and there were a lot of people that are kind of like full on Tesla bulls that were really upset with the way that he handled that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of took it. So you and I haven't talked about this yet, but I kind of took it the same way that you did, Emmett, where he was just being very literal. Like there's a chance that there's more to the story here.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
thinking is it's kind of like his Asperger's is like he's just like stating a fact. He's not trying to be
Yeah.
controversial. He's just thinking like
Yeah.
it could be that there's this surface level story doesn't pan out. Then he did a
Yeah.
little bit more digging. Turns out that's probably highly unlikely. So he deleted the tweet. But still, all these people
Yeah.
were incredibly upset. So
Yeah. Lots of articles. I mean, we were all fooled by Juicy Smollett, right? Within that, remember that case? Like, if the next day anyone tweeted like, "There's a chance this is false," you'd be vilified, like you'd be taken to the town
yeah,
square
you
and
would have
whipped,
been
you know?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's lots of cases of this where, so he's just learning from the past and saying, "Hey, there's a tiny chance something else happened here," given the past to the guy and this, so people got so upset. It's just, I don't know, it triggers so many people. And that's why I put out a tweet that says like suspending judgment is like one of the hardest things to do. And like sometimes you have to suspend judgment on something that seems so emotionally triggering until like all information, like we weren't physically there to witness it. There's no like security camera footage shown of the incident yet. There's like, I would think they have security camera footage, by the way. I mean, this house is like, it's like one of the most powerful political people in the country. You'd think they have security camera footage everywhere. So I don't, I'm sure he was assaulted and it was a terrible thing, but Elon, he's just, like you said, stating a fact, a tiny chance. We don't have, there's could be something else here, but people went crazy with it. And like, it was like, all over the weekend, everyone, even like I talked to my dad and he's like triggered about it a little bit, you could tell, but he's just, most people don't understand the context. He's just responding to Hillary Clinton. He's not outwardly just like putting it out there. He was responding to someone who's kind of using it to their political advantage in a wrong way, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So Martin Muldoon in the comments here says, with all that's going on, Elon should refrain from getting involved in guessing games. I think that was one of the more common criticisms that I've seen. Just like, just put your head down, do your work, Elon, and stop trying to like get involved in every single controversy, because it brings you down, it brings Twitter down, it brings Tesla down, and I think there's a decent point there. But I think Elon, he really is so committed to actually promoting free speech that I think he wants to be kind of a signal of that like I'm gonna get things wrong from time to time, but I think people who look closely will understand that he actually has good intentions. But a lot of others will just use every single incident like this as a chance to kind of sling mud and just try to bring him down. So I don't think the controversy is going to end, but it'll more.
There could be like a
national span's too short.
Yeah. I mean, I could see there being like National Enquirer type outlets just hanging on everything Elon's doing. Like, they have stuff like that for the royal family in the UK or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably going to be like businesses made of just hanging on every single word or emoticon or whatever, emoji that Elon tweets and like reading, creating, articles. And I might even look at some of that stuff. I don't know. I mean, there's so many people fascinated, obsessed with Elon. I mean, people that hate him that'll buy it. It's going to be, he's already becoming in front of us like the biggest figure in our living history that we've lived in. It's really crazy. So we'll see how it evolves. But I mean, what does it mean for Tesla stock? I mean, what do you think? The Twitter, him becoming the biggest person in living history. What does this mean for Tesla stock? Do you think it's good or bad overall, or do you think it's neutral? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, so I think it's mostly neutral, but there's all sorts of stuff going on. I mean, first off, I was a little bit surprised that he didn't have to sell more Tesla shares to close the deal. I don't know if you've seen this, but I haven't really seen any details of how the financing was secured and like who the third party equity was, and so I'd be very curious if more of those details get public, because apparently he didn't need to sell any more Tesla shares, so that's certainly good news. So that was the most immediate benefit to Tesla, in my opinion. Then like you've got this thing of like advertisers leaving, and so like GM left right away. So Mary's leading once more. So there's going to be a little bit of that, I think, but I think mostly that's going to hurt kind of Twitter's business model. So they're going to really have to figure out how to stop bleeding cash there, because they've got a lot of interest they need to pay with this new debt financing that went in there. So there's a lot of heavy lifting I think that needs to be done on the Twitter side. But as for Tesla, I don't really think it is going to be much of an impact. I've seen some people kind of commenting that it could, like there's this controversy. I think Laura Kolodny, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, but
Yeah.
she had this whole like article about how like, they were using Tesla's resources. And so that was going to like slow down FSD and like all this stuff. And it's so funny because it's like these are the same people who always say that FSD is a sham and it's never going to go anywhere. But then all of a sudden it's a controversy if you're like using those resources for something else. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of think it's going to be a nothing burger. But do you have thoughts? Like, is there going to be one of the interesting angles I haven't really thought too much about is like, is there going to be some marketing benefit to Tesla of using Twitter somehow? Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. I think there's going to be synergies. Like speaking of that, Laura Kolodny, she's in the business. She ever since I can remember, she's always been looking for ways to smear Elon. And I've heard people met her in person and said that she's very nice and like a normal like lady or a nice person. But I don't understand how someone like that is just like they're on like a mission to smear him. They must think he's like an evil person and just trying to do present that. Maybe that's how they get more clicks. I don't know, but it's not good.
I've spoken to her and she seems very reasonable, but like she's got a very ingrained point of view, and it's just it's not altering, as new facts come out. So it's a little frustrating. But anyway,
I think I have this suspicion that a number of these journalists have become sort of like Jim Chanos disciples of some degree because Jim Chanos made some very wealthy journalists, some journalists very wealthy with the Enron thing when he discovered or kind of put a big deal about Enron. I think some journalists got very wealthy off of writing books about that or discovering it and became well known in their community. And so I think there's something there where he's sort of like respected among some of these journalists that want to find the next Enron, and he's somehow convinced that Tesla is the next Enron, and so they've sort of thought that for a while now. But that's not the case, we know. But they live in a different reality. They're trying to prove, but it's never going to come that. Speaking of which, I was at a Halloween party this weekend, and one guy I was introduced to, I guess he works at a big trucking company in like their new energy division. He does like solar farms. Like, oh yeah, my partner did wind farms. So he's like, yeah, I'm all about that. And he's like, and hydrogen fuel cells, that's the future. And I was like, what do you mean? Like just for energy storage? Or he's like, everything. I'm like, transportation too. He's like, yeah. He's like trucks. Like he's like, we're converting all the trucks to hydrogen fuel cell. You'll see. He's like, well, what about the electric? He's like, no, Tesla, the electric vehicle. Like his big thing was like, lithium ion is too heavy, and it's like he had some term for it, like on the roads, it destroys the roads because they're too heavy, the trucks, and they crush the road. I don't know, it's kind of crazy. And
it was like the Bill Gates thing from 3 years ago, and Elon's like, no, we have these trucks, they're actually working, so you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And then I threw in there at some point in our conversation, I was like, well, Elon Musk calls them hydrogen fuel cells, right? And then he was like, I feel like it upset him because I think that's his livelihood, is trying to work on this. And then like as I was trying to walk away, he kept saying, Tesla is a ticking time bomb. And he said it to me like 3 times in a row as I was walking away. I was trying to like plan how I exit this conversation, and he was just like really anti-Tesla. It was really
people
crazy.
Get so triggered. It's so interesting.
Yeah. It was.
So
it
what
was,
were you dressed up as something for this Halloween party?
Yeah, Peter Pan. And yeah, so my wife was Tinkerbell. First time I've dressed up in like 5+ years. But back to Elon and Tesla, not to get too sidetracked there. I mean, they've been sharing, SpaceX and Tesla have been sharing resources for over a decade, and both companies are better for it. I don't see why that's not going to be the case for Twitter and SpaceX and Tesla. The top engineers, you can share information. The top Twitter engineers might do something helpful for Tesla safety, of logging verifications. There's lots of synergies there. The app of Twitter does some special things that maybe can be borrowed into the app of the Tesla app. Eventually they will be combined. Eventually it's going to be one big X.com app or something where you'll have all these synergies between Tesla and SpaceX and Starlink. Maybe, your phone will be connected to Starlink with T-Mobile, and maybe, it's going to be really incredible, the future that gets drummed up here with the Twitter, takeover. I'm excited. I think it's only good from here. There'll be lots of smearing articles saying all this negative stuff, but and I'm also surprised that there's no reported new stock sales. Some people speculated that his foundation they donated a bunch of shares to, perhaps somehow that took a position. I'm not sure about the rules of that, how that works, but we'll find out more in the next few weeks, I would think, about the actual financing details of it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how how that information comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the on like the shared resources, I mean, one of the criticisms of that though has just been that it's like you're stealing resources from Tesla. But I'm almost certain that these people would or the that Twitter would be paying Tesla for use of those individuals. I mean, that's the way that it's done. I mean, in a lot of companies, there are different divisions or different legal entities where you actually can't use the same resources. So there's this idea called transfer pricing, where you just like you pay an arm's length transaction to different divisions within a company, and I think you would
Mhm.
certainly do the same thing, with Twitter and Tesla. So I really think that there's going to be or that was really not an issue. But I'm very curious to see the financing arrangements, though. I think there was
Yeah,
a lot of interest.
Larry and Goldberg in the comments says there's a significant increase in private financing of the Twitter deal. Yeah, I heard that too. And I heard the 13 billion debt being serviced at these interest rates is like a billion a year or something. That's pretty high
Mhm.
compared to when interest rates were, much lower. So yeah, the debt financing, the debt servicing is going to be expensive. They'll have to do, figure out how to make money quick in Twitter to make it worth it. Seems like. Um, So yeah, so let's move on to the next thing. You had a big guest over the weekend, right? Tell us about that. You had someone visiting you.
Yeah, two guests actually. So we've spoken a couple times on this channel, and actually had Florian Minderop, who is the founder of Mr. Green. He was a guest host on the channel at one point. But for those who are not familiar, Mr. Green is a European leasing company. They basically lease Teslas. They combine like the vehicle lease with insurance and maintenance, and it's like a whole thing. So you just pay one subscription price. But anyway, they own 5,000 Teslas. They are really trying to increase their sales internally, or to their customers of full self-driving, because they want to lock in today's prices. But
Hmm.
being in Europe, they've never been able to actually experience the beta. So I've been talking with them for a while, and they ended up flying out on Saturday to test out the beta. So they've been driving my car around for a couple days now, just experiencing the beta for the very first time. So it was very interesting, kind of seeing them experience it, because they're huge. They're kind of I don't want to say betting their company, but they're investing heavily with upside optionality. That's kind of contingent on FSD beta really improving drastically and certainly rolling out to Europe. And so it was very interesting seeing these two guys, their experience driving it. And they had different personalities too, which was really interesting. So Keys, the first guy who drove it, he's kind of like me. He's like a little bit more, I don't say timid, but like you don't want to upset the other drivers on the road. So when it starts doing something silly, you just take over just to be polite to the other drivers on the road. But Mark is very much of like the James Dalma mindset, where he's like, it hasn't done anything wrong. I don't mind being honked at, so he just kind of lets it go.
Yeah.
So it was funny because they had like slightly different experiences, but Mark, who's one of the co-founders, so he and Florian were the co-founders of this company. He was just completely blown away by it. He's just like, because he let it kind of do its thing and like get through the mistakes, and he could see that it would eventually do the right thing safely. He was just incredibly impressed. So
Mm.
yeah, they had a really great time. They've been driving around all over town for the last couple of days, and I think one of them's driving to Chicago today, do a little road trip, try it in that downtown traffic. So yeah, it'll be. I'm kind of curious, once they've had a little bit more time to digest, what their thinking is, and if they're going to try to accelerate their rollout or what. But it was very interesting talking to them, and just a couple cool guys too. We went to the U of M Michigan State game too, which was a lot of fun. Got to experience
Yeah.
some real American culture. So
Great.
yeah, it was a really good time.
Yeah, I can't imagine a couple people more anticipating the experience of FSD beta more than they were, right? Because they're in this
Yeah.
business in Europe that's been waiting for FSD beta, and they're like 5 to 10,000 Teslas they pretty much own and lease out, and they're planning out how to do the FSD beta implications of their business for years now,
Hmm.
watching videos of the US people like you. And here they do. They travel to US specifically almost to test out FSD beta. So they probably had the most interesting expectation, long oversaw
Yeah.
expectations of anyone ever using FSD beta, and they were clearly very excited, impressed, it
Yeah.
sounds like.
I was a little bit nervous because I was so excited to get beta when I got it for the first time. I mean,
Yeah,
I was like just spending hours driving trying to like game my safety score to be just right.
yeah,
And when I finally got it, I was actually really disappointed. It was much worse back then. This was a year ago.
yeah.
But I was kind of like, oh, this is actually making mistakes all the time, and I've got to take over, and it's uncomfortable. And but it's improved so much in the last year. But I still had a little concern that they might, have the same sort of thing and think, oh, maybe we need to, slow down a little bit our, deployment of FSD. But it seems like they had the opposite reaction, at least from what the initial take I could tell was. So
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's come a long way since when you first got it too, so it's like, and I saw an electric report that the newest version is being pushed out right now or today or something.
yeah, I saw
Um,
the Dirty Tesla, a couple others were downloading it. So yeah,
yeah.
it'd
So
be really cool if I got that too, and they could see one of the updates and see
yeah,
see what happens.
this is the most anticipated. I would say this is the most anticipated release of FSD beta in many months, right? And it's been talked about for a while. It was supposed to be like a new number,
Probably,
but
yeah.
it
I mean,
just
like
wants.
probably the first .69 was a bigger deal, but aside from that, I think this is gonna be a really big one.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, exciting. A couple friends of mine have Teslas, or one in particular I was talking to. He bought the FSD beta, hasn't got it yet, and another one I met at the same Halloween party said the same thing. So I know there's a lot of people that bought the FSD beta, at least here in the Bay Area, that haven't got it yet. So when wide release comes out, they'll get it, and it'll be curious to see all these people that don't follow Tesla as closely as we do, but somehow they paid for the FSD beta when they start using it, or if they start using it actively, what their thoughts are about it, versus people like
Yeah.
us who are watching other people's videos about it before we even try it.
Right. Yeah, well,
Mm.
one of the things I think Farzad might be the one who coined this, but he calls it the wife test. So like he can
Yeah,
handle it all the time, but like when he turns it on with his wife in the car, she gets so annoyed, and it's the same thing for me because it's just
me too.
uncomfortable. It's like
Mhm.
it when you can get to the point where your wife or some uninterested passenger who does not care about full self driving at all,
Or prefers it.
um, you know, yeah,
Maybe they at
yeah,
some
or
point they prefer it. Yeah,
at some point, they
like an
prefer it. Like,
autopilot
that to me
now.
is gonna be a big milestone, and,
Yeah,
then you and I were talking for a while, when would you actually feel comfortable going in the back seat? I still feel like we're a long ways off from that, so that's kinda like my gauge of robo-taxis.
yeah, hmm,
But FSD is I think it's getting close. Like, the rate of improvement lately has been very, very strong. So,
yeah,
makes me
and it's
optimistic.
It's very good with surprisingly so good with pedestrians and bikes that I've noticed, so, you don't want it to make any mistake whatsoever on that stuff, obviously. But so far it's been very impressive to me on pedestrians and bikers. Um so yeah, I guess anything else we want to touch? Oh yeah, the Falcon Heavy, right? That was today. Dual. I mean, everyone's vilifying. It's like the media. I think it throws people through a loop because everyone's been vilifying and saying all these negative things about Elon all weekend, and then on Monday, Elon's like the hero because he's launching the U.S. defense stuff, into space on Falcon Heavy, and it's doing like a crazy, landing again, and it's like, oh, Elon's the hero. He's, helping out our defense, our government and defense. I don't know. So, but it's just, I feel like he's
Yeah.
done this a few times, but it helps the perception of Elon to have like these views showing that, hey, you can't vilify him helping the Department of Defense to launch things to space, I think. Right.
Yeah, yeah, it was a Space Force launch, I think, and they
Yeah.
actually I read like just I forget which outlet it was, but it wasn't like a favorable Elon outlet, but they said specifically in there that it was 30% cheaper, I think, than the traditional ULA launch for a similar size. So I thought that was really good that just a kind of more or less neutral media outlet was just commenting on how this was a successful launch, essentially, that saved the government money. And that's that's such a base fact of like what he's doing is like he's creating value through all these companies, and you and I know that, and all the people watching know that, but it just seems to be lost on so many people. So I think the more just kind of successful things like this that that he does that are providing real value. I think Starlink's probably going to be happening soon. I mean, you can imagine when that starts rolling out in airplanes, that'll be a kind of an eye opener for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just like the kind of value that they're creating. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
interesting. I watched the launch, the little snippet of it anyways today. And it was kind of a bummer just because it was super foggy. So you actually couldn't
Yeah,
see
you could
like
hear
the
it,
side
but
by
you couldn't
side
see.
landing. It was like the most crazy thing. And it
Yeah.
was this one was a little interesting because it seemed like one of the side boosters landed like a good 4 seconds maybe before the other one. So it was different than
Mhm.
the one, 3 years ago or so. So it was
Yeah.
not quite as dramatic on the eyes, but it's still it's such an impressive vehicle. In my mind, it's like the Model X of rockets. Like it's a super niche product. It's like amazing, but it really isn't
Yeah.
practical in the long run.
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad they developed it.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait for the Starship. I mean, that first launch, I wanna fly out to go see it in person somehow. I'm sure there's gonna be like it's probably gonna be like 1,000,000 people, space enthusiasts that try to visit the first Starship. I mean, everyone will have to be like 10 miles away or something, but you'll be able to see it from far away or something. I mean, that was supposed to happen this year sometime. Do you think it's still on track for this calendar year, the Starship orbital launch?
Yeah, well, they did the full stack. I can't remember if they did like the engine test, but it seems like it'll be close. It wouldn't surprise me if it leaks into next year, but I,
We keep
I,
saying it's being pushed back. I mean, our conspiracy theory of mine is that it's being held back because of Artemis, because NASA wants Artemis to go first, but that keeps getting that thing's been a disaster. That's been garaged several times. I don't know what the status is of that now. I feel like they should just scrap it altogether, but it was like $12 billion or something.
no,
Crazy.
they should have scrapped it years ago. I think it's
Yeah.
Artemis that whole program. It's a mess.
Oh man, yeah. That when is that thing going to go up in the? I think once that goes up, then it's like the hurdles will be, that then like the U.S. news cycle can run like, hey, someone did something great with space that's not SpaceX, these other companies that we spent so much money on. Okay, now you're free to go SpaceX and do your thing. I don't think they want SpaceX to like take the limelight of everyone's imagination before giving these other companies or a chance to cash in on some of that credibility.
Yeah, I mean, the only counterpoint I would have to that though is there was kind of that race with the Boeing Starliner and the Dragon capsule to get astronauts back up to the space station, and they were
That's
like
true.
neck and neck for the longest time. But eventually, it was just like Boeing had huge issues, and I don't even know if
Yeah.
they ever went to space. Do you know? I don't remember. I
I
don't
don't
think
think
I'm.
so. But we don't know what happened behind the scenes. It could have been a very difficult struggle, of lobbying and
Yeah.
whatever bureaucratic red tape cutting, behind the scenes to let SpaceX's Dragon, go ahead with everything there. So I don't know. There could be something similar going on with Starship, but Elon, yeah, it's a very political or a very murky business, as you probably know too. It's just like imagine what's going on with Ford and GM with unions and everything, but like 10 times more complicated probably with this crazy space industry we're in that they've been in, the United Launch Alliance, whatever that thing is now.
Well, it gets very political because a lot of the congressmen and women want to support the jobs of the local factories that are spread throughout the whole United States, which is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why it's so inefficient. But that's why it's had the political support because you're
Yeah.
directly supporting American jobs and
Yeah.
like high paying specialized manufacturing.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
not the right way to do it. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Before we go to Q&A, one update I saw Larry Goldberg, again, great contributor to our
Should just bring him
information
on
here.
here.
Yeah, we should just bring him on. Yeah. He said the newest FSD release is being rolled out to users now. It's just some kind of bug patch, but the big release we've all been anticipating is still a few weeks away. It's only being internally tested by Tesla employees. So Larry's usually very spot on with his information, so that sounds very reasonable to me about what's going on, as
And he
opposed
also
to the
clarified that they always staggered the landing of the boosters on the Falcon Heavy, which is
Mhm.
true. Like if you notice on the first one, they did not touch down at the exact same time. But my whole point was with this one, they were more drastically staggered than on the
Mm.
previous launch.
Mhm. Yeah, and Andrew Bazile said his FSD beta saw their house cat like crossing the road in the dark and stopped for it. I haven't seen
Whoa,
that, and
really?
he said he
Wow.
saw it on the screen, even a house cat. I haven't seen a cat shown on my screen, my FSD beta screen yet, but that'll be cool when you see little cats and dogs on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have not. So far, my experience with small animals is that FSC does not mind trying to run over a squirrel, but it'll stop for a dog. But I haven't seen the cat
Yeah.
one yet.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna put my cat in the road next time and just like put it on, test it out, and see. Maybe. Yeah. My cat will probably scamper away, but at least maybe I'll catch it on the display there, what it looks like. So, all right. Well, why don't we go to Q&A here, and we'll spend the next 20 minutes just answering questions or going through things. From Brave on YouTube comments, question: with the zero COVID policy in China, do you fear that those winter shutdowns become a recurrent event for Tesla and thus decrease its growth rate and valuation long term? I mean, this is certainly a concern I've had. I listened to more analysis of uh, the current state of the CCP and Xi, President Xi there, and the new 7 people at the top are all like loyalists to him now. There's not one dissenter. It's all just like his own loyalists, and he promoted people that were loyal to him, including like the Shanghai minister, who was perhaps, even though the Shanghai shutdowns caused a lot of strife, it was like 2 months shut down earlier this year, the zero COVID Shanghai shutdown. It was politically unpopular in some ways, but maybe he gave that guy a promotion to be number 2 because he did what was very unpopular and was loyal to President Xi, you know, for that reason, even though, it was hard to do. So I think the zero COVID policy, it's depending on President Xi and what he's gonna say about it, and all the people around him are going to either enforce it, like with the example of the Shanghai minister getting promoted to number 2. I think they all must see that, and if he's going to stay hardcore on zero COVID, it could be a big issue in China for production and factory output. And he seems like the economy is not as important now as keeping the party in power or something. So I don't know, Matt. What are your thoughts about it? I mean, that's just based on I've been really on this rabbit hole of digging into like details of President Xi's life and who he is as a person, given that he's like the second most politically powerful person in the world. I feel like it's important for me to like investigate him and figure out more, but I don't know how much I really know. I'm just listening to a lot of people that like claim to be experts on it.
Yeah, it does seem pretty clear that zero COVID is here to stay. I mean, at the People's Congress a couple weeks ago, they were talking in the opening remarks about how they like China has the world's best policy around COVID prevention, and they're going to continue with it, which I was kind of surprised by, that they were kind of using that as a point of pride, given some of the severe kind of anxiety that seemed to be causing for the citizens of Shanghai. So I was a little bit surprised by that. But then just this past weekend, or maybe it was yesterday, I think, did you see this Disneyland shutdown that just happened like
Yeah.
abruptly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where was this? Was it Shanghai or was it somewhere else?
I think it was Shanghai. Yeah. I think it was Shanghai. Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who didn't see, like, they just abruptly shut down Disneyland Shanghai and would not let anybody leave until they had produced a zero COVID or a negative COVID test. So just very stark, very aggressive, very kind of authoritarian policy in place around COVID. So I think this absolutely is a risk for Tesla in the at least in the short term, and maybe even a little in the medium longer term.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on the
Unfortunately.
flip side, I think my intuition is that Elon and Tesla have almost as good of a relationship as you can have with the CCP for a U.S. company. So I know there's concerns they have about like SpaceX or Starlink and stuff, but that's a different company, and I think they know how to segregate that or separate that from the Tesla business model with intertwined with China's economy and all the manufacturing technology they're getting through Tesla and FSD. That's a tremendous piece of technology that they are probably going to be able to get a piece of through Tesla as Tesla develops it. So I think that there's a positive synergy for Tesla with Shanghai, more so than Apple, even in some ways at this point.
Yeah.
But Apple has Foxconn, and Foxconn is huge. Is Foxconn a Taiwan company or is it Chinese?
I
I
thought it
feel
was
like I
mainland
read that
China,
was,
but I could be wrong about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look into that. I don't want to opine about that. Anyway, Elon's comment about Taiwan becoming an administrative state. I think when he put that tweet out about that, he was speaking his mind, and it was again very triggering for many people. But I think got him a ton of brownie points. That's not why he tweeted it, I don't think, but I think it did get him a ton of brownie points with the government in China.
Yeah. Yeah. One other point on this COVID thing is, Tesla does have experience now with this closed loop system, which, they will
Mm,
let you do if you keep your employees on site. So the supply chain can be a little challenging still in a COVID shutdown, but I would I would bet a large sum of money that the Tesla China team is putting in, contingency plans and trying to figure out how, if they did have another shutdown, how could they, kind of maximize their output in that, kind of reduced workload, closed loop system type of environment. So,
yeah.
just because there was another like COVID lockdown, that doesn't mean that output drops to zero for 4 months or something like that.
Yeah. And the trickiest part has got to be all not only the Tesla suppliers in China, the hundreds or thousands of Tesla suppliers for Tesla in China that have to also keep producing output, but then also the logistics, like all the truckers in China, they have to be able to roam and do what they do during a zero COVID lockdown. So, it's tricky, but I feel like if anyone can figure it out, Tesla China team can, and the head of Tesla China, I can't remember his name. I should know his name like the back of my hand. He's probably one of the top 3 or 5 most important people in all of the Tesla organization.
I thought it was like
So he's,
Grace Tower or something like that.
I think it was like some new guy, Tom. I don't remember. I can't remember. But if anyone in the comments remembers the head of Tesla China, put it in there. I could look it up. But he's probably, I need to study him a little more carefully. He seems to be very proficient at developing Tesla China. So let's go to the next question. From Breakfast Pizza, question: thoughts on George Hott stepping down from Comma AI? Combo of him, Argo AI shutting down, and other autonomous players stopping seems to hint that market is realizing Tesla is winning the race. Yeah, I saw this. Martin Muldoon tagged me a news report yesterday morning. I retweeted it, that George Hott's letter of him stepping down. That's a big deal. I mean, Comma AI, I thought was like, I thought they were doing a lot of good stuff given how lean they were. They're super lean, and like he had this vision. I don't know, did he get? I'm trying to read between the lines, like, because it's clearly like there was no. I couldn't, like, I've watched some of George Hunt's videos. I've seen some of his writings recently, but I didn't get any inkling that he was like unhappy or looking to leave. So all of a sudden, this new letter comes out, which is very like well written, very taking the high road kind of approach. Reading between the lines, like what happened? Did he get pushed out by some investors? Did he have like a not like, did he have some kind of very big disagreement with some top investors, perhaps, or some top employees? I don't know. There must be something to it, though. I don't think he just woke up one morning and was like, this isn't for me. I'm going to work on stuff like Andre Karpathy, something different. Like, what do you
You
have any
don't.
thoughts on
So I
this?
guess I guess I was leaning a little bit more towards the, he wanted to work on other things. I mean, George Hotz is not like some autonomy guy who's only ever been interested in, artificial intelligence or anything like that. I mean, he's always
Yeah,
been, maybe polymath is too strong of a word, but he's been interested in a lot of different areas of tech, and he's been working on this problem for a long time now.
yeah.
And
It's been
so
his
so my
baby. It's like identity. I feel like it's been his
yeah,
identity.
it must be to some extent, but at the same time, I like with all I think he would have been expecting to have made more progress than Comma AI has actually made to date. And so somebody said in one of the Twitter comments that I would imagine after watching Tesla's AI day and like how advanced their techniques that they're implementing are compared to what
Mm,
Comma was doing, which was a little bit more basic. They were, for the most part, their primary strategy, at least as far as I'm not a technical expert here, but my understanding is their primary strategy was kind of using the input from their fleet of drivers to essentially mimic what a human driver would do in any given situation that the autonomous car has. And I think
mhm.
there's probably inherent limitations to how far you can make that kind of a simple approach of a like a AI system work for like handling a very complex, like traffic situation with a bicyclist that comes out or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. My sense was that he may be a little concerned, just that they were never going to make it with their current approach, and so maybe he wants to work on something else. I could be wrong. I don't think anybody really knows, but publicly anyway. But
Yeah.
to me, it seems like we might have a little bit of a different viewpoint on what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's more to meets the I don't know. My mind just wants to read between the lines even when it's not possible sometimes, even when there's nothing to read there. But I still like to float different narratives in my head to see if something clicks when more data comes as time goes on. Um, I wonder if we might figure it out one day in the future. Maybe if there is more to meets the eye there, maybe he'll open up more about it in the future at some point. If
I'd love to
not,
have you
maybe.
interview him again. That was such a fun interview that you and Dave did with him. It
Oh
was like
yeah,
one of my
that was
favorites.
cool. Yeah, that was a good one. I mean, he's clearly like, you know, a fascinating person, and he understands technology, and he's the first person to. If people don't know, he's the first person to crack the iPhone. Like the thing that people thought was impossible, he like hacked into an iPhone at the age of like 14 or 15 or something. That's what made him that got him on the map initially. And then he like interned at Google over time. He was like a prodigy of coding,
Yeah.
and Elon even tried to hire him to help him with FSD beta at some point. George told the story on like Lex Friedman's channel once or whatever. But George is a little bit of a hot potato or a little bit of Pandora's box in some ways. And I think
He's
Elon
got some
realizes
extreme
that.
eccentricities for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But I feel also that George has matured because now he's probably close to 30 or something. I don't know. But he seems to have matured. I've been following over the last several years, and he seems to have matured to a point where maybe he could be a manager or CEO. So the thing that I'm thinking that maybe not, if there's nothing to read between the lines, maybe he just realized that, hey, I'm not a good manager. I'm not a good CEO. I got to step away from this and do something that's my strength, like sort of like Andre, maybe he listened to Andre's interview with Lex Friedman, where Andre's basically saying that, which I listened to as well. Finally, the end of it is long. I wanted to listen to the whole thing, but basically Andre didn't like being a manager or CEO. It's not a fun job for a lot of people. I've been a little bit of a manager of different employees when I was and I didn't like it either. I wasn't good at it. I don't like being a jerk to people and like trying to crack the whip on people. It's not something I want to do. It's not something I'm good at. And I don't like being the evil, the person to be feared, and I think George, maybe he realized after listening to Andre's interview, like, I can be like Andre. I don't have to be a manager. I'm going to step away, like maybe it's something he's been teetering with and it just put him over the edge on it. That's possible. That's not as fun to think about as a crazy narrative, but it seems like highly likely.
Yeah, I could see that too.
So, yeah. And I see from the last thing, Larry again. Thank you, Larry. You are awesome contributor. He says, it was Tom Zhu is the Tesla's top China executive.
Yeah.
Tom Zhu. Yeah. He was promoted in July 8th of 2022 to do more than just oversee China. Maybe he's overseeing all of Asia or something, if I recall. It's more than just China, I think.
Asia Pacific, according to Larry.
Yeah, that's
you and I should step down. Just let Larry handle it from here.
It should be the Larry show. Yeah, Larry, you got the facts right. Okay. From Andrew Bazile, question: the synergies between SpaceX and Tesla have been tremendously beneficial to Tesla. In your minds, which potential synergies between Twitter and Tesla are most exciting? Yeah, that's what's exciting to me, is not knowing the synergies yet. Like that's what's exciting. Like what synergies are we going to discover or think through or have thought experiments on that come to fruition that we haven't yet thought about for synergies between Twitter and Tesla, right? So one thing we was talking about earlier is like maybe this verification process Twitter is going to develop will somehow help on the Tesla. Maybe the Tesla app will be rolled into Twitter somehow, and so instead of me having two different apps to do the things on Twitter or Tesla, just one app, maybe Twitter will be in the display, easier to look at or scroll through or do things on the display of Tesla. There's so many interesting synergies that they will have, those companies. I'm excited I'm excited that we don't know them yet, that there's going to be some cool things. What do you think, Matt?
So the one thing that I'm probably most excited about, and I'm not exactly sure how it might pan out, but like Tesla still has not spent any money on advertising yet, and they're getting to the point, I think, where right now they're eating through the backlog a little bit. It's still healthy, but they're not expanding their backlog like crazy like they had been. So at some point, if they're going to get to 5, 10, and certainly 20 million vehicles, I think they're going to need to do some amount of advertising. So I think there's probably some very interesting ways which Tesla could try that on Twitter's, on the Twitter app, in a way that would be interesting and not just like the current kind of like promoted tweets and that sort of thing on Twitter are like really low engagement and not that interesting. But I think Elon's talked about, having some better video features and, having some longer form content available. So I think if Tesla were to kind of get involved in, if they do decide that it's the right thing for Tesla's business to start advertising, I could see them trying to do it in a pretty unconventional way on Twitter. And that could potentially have some pretty interesting results, I think. And probably at a low cost, like compared to what GM and Ford is doing, like buying Super Bowl commercials. It's so dumb. Like it's such a horrible strategy.
It is so like 20th century stuff. Yeah. The one good thing I'd say about Facebook, I use Facebook once a week or once every few days. I go in just to like see pictures of friends and family putting up their families and stuff. But the one good thing that Facebook does is they have the advertising down, I think the way Elon wants to do it in some sense, where I guess Facebook's like listening to me, or I don't know, it's like infringed on my privacy in so many ways I don't even know, but somehow it knows the things I'm talking about that it would be useful to me. And when I pull up my Facebook app, there's been a number of times where I'm like, this is exactly what I want. How does Facebook know? And I like buy it on the app because I'm like, wow, that's awesome. So maybe I think he wants to make Twitter's advertising useful like that. But I wonder if that's going to mean that Twitter then has to like be listening to your conversations and like infringe upon quote unquote privacy in a way that Facebook seems to do to get that information down to target what you want, So we're curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next question. From Charles on YouTube. Auto sales in Q1 are typically lower with the EV tax credit. Do y'all think Tesla will beat Q4 production deliveries in Q1 2023? I think they will. I mean, I think, auto sales in Q1 are typically lower. But I do think with where we are in the ramp of Giga Berlin and Giga Austin, like especially in Q1, like this quarter, the ramp is like starting to curve up a little bit. Like it's like that. And then next quarter, Q1, it's going to be more like that. Q1 and Q2, it's going to be like that to like the maximum part of the S curve before it flattens out, I think. So I do think because of the ramping of Berlin and Austin, that Q1 and will be a record, and Q2 will be another record after Q1, probably. That's my guess. And we'll see about after that. But what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, the seasonality thing, I think it's important to keep in mind that like the entire industry sees a slowdown in Q1 relative to Q4. But that's like you really have to keep in mind the difference between inventory levels of all these different manufacturers when you're talking about that, because the GMs, the Fords of the world, they've got 60 to 90 days of sales outstanding, which is just a huge amount of cars sitting on lots. If you want to buy whatever GM car today, you can go and buy it and drive home today. That is not true of Teslas. So I think it stands to reason that the order rate will probably slow down even for Tesla in Q1 a little bit. But when they've got, I think it's something like 10 days of sales outstanding right now, 10 days of inventory. So like for them to increase their inventory by, I don't know, say 5 days even, and they would grow inventory levels by, I don't know what that would translate to, maybe 20,000 cars, something like that. That's just not that big of a deal. And so I think for the overall market is going to see this decrease, but I think Tesla is going to keep right on increasing just because their demand is still higher than the available inventory and then like the available production rate. Oh, and then next big future. Hey, Brian, shout out to you. Also comments there's the $7,500 tax credit coming in 2023. So
that's what's going to drive it up.
Yeah, in the U.S. in particular. I mean, that's going to be, I think, a huge catalyst. That I think a lot of people that I'm talking to don't even know that that's a thing yet. Like, in my mind, like the market.
I've talked to a lot of people that don't know
for some reason, just don't understand like what's going on here. I don't know.
People are not as informed as in China. People are not in China. Apparently, everyone was informed about this coming price cut, And then that happened. But here in the US, I've talked to a few people that are thinking about buying a new Tesla. Like now, like, what do you think I should get? And I'm like, well, you should probably wait till try to take delivery till the beginning of 2023 for that. And like, what are you talking about? I didn't know about there's a $7,500 credit. I was like, yeah. So no one in the US, not many people in the US
It's
understand,
so
our
strange.
it is so strange.
Yeah.
I also see Brian from Brian Next Big Future. We had him we interviewed him on our channel once. He also is talking about Argo had 2,100 employees and they were burning 2 billion a year. They shut down. I forgot to mention. So not just Comma AI. Comma AI was like peanuts compared to how big Argo was in terms of technology. I'd say Comma AI probably had better technology than whatever Argo was working on in my mind. I don't know, but Argo was this Ford backed and some other big company backed AI company that shut down. It announced it's shutting down last week, and that's a big deal. That's 2,100 employees. That's a lot. So
And
one other plug for Brian. He has a really under the radar YouTube channel. I'm subscribed to it, but he does great like futuristic, like crazy theories. It's like if you combined Warren Redlick with Kurt Vonnegut, the sci-fi author, if you combine them together, that's sort of to me sort of what like Brian's YouTube channel is like. It's really cool stuff he puts together about what the future holds for us in different ways. Really cool.
and a prolific
Yeah.
writer too. He's done, what is it, like 30,000 blog posts or something just mind-blowing like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, a lot of it has stuff that he wrote years ago that's turning out to be true. So yeah, Brian is a futurist, not that's very under the radar, but worth watching or subscribing. Anyway, next, let's do one more question. It's close. It's after 10:30 here. So last question here from Martin Muldoon. Question: any word out of Rocket Lab? Haven't heard from them recently. Yeah, Rocket Lab. I think they're going to be a benefactor in some weird way of the vilification of Elon Musk and people being afraid of Elon Musk having too much power. Elon Musk and his companies. I think there will be certain, there's some political fallout to that, and I think they're going to start. Once Rocket Lab has their Virginia launch pad facility set up, I think they're going to get a lot of business from the U.S. Space Force and I think SpaceX will still do well, but I think there'll be a lot of people anti-Elon who are in that industry who will just go with Rocket Lab for setting satellites up, even if it costs a little bit more or if it's comparable or whatever. So I think Rocket Lab could be a little bit of have nice benefit. It's almost like a hedge in some ways against Elon and SpaceX being vilified more. But I do, I don't know any new words out of Rocket Lab on anything. Matt went to their investor day a month or two ago.
They've got
I don't know
earnings
if there's
next
been
week, I
much
think,
news since
actually.
then.
They've got earnings
Yeah.
on next Wednesday, I believe it is, at 5:30 Eastern. So hopefully we'll get some good news out of there. One of the things that I think is really interesting in the near term with them that maybe doesn't get enough attention is they're really trying to ramp up their turnaround time so that if a customer, just says, hey, I've got the satellite, I want to launch it next week, they could actually possibly launch it. Next week is a bit of an exaggeration, but they could do something, go from like signing a contract to getting it on the launch pad within 2 or 3 months, which is kind of unheard of. So, they've gone, like, if you look at their financials, you'd be like, oh, they're losing money. It's not that great. But if they can increase their launch cadence by, 2 to 3x, which they certainly can do, they've got the capability to do it. They just really need to increase their processes a bit. And their backlog is certainly long enough to support that kind of like higher cadence. Then it could be a really big boost to their financials. I mean, the operating leverage potential there is really big, and it's certainly, just like Tesla, it drives up their gross margins when they kind of increase their volume of services that they provide. So, Rocket Lab, I think we've been thinking it's going to take a while for this story to pan out, and I think that is true. But already, I think I'm starting to get a little bit more excited about some of the financial synergies that like this just higher launch cadence could provide.
Yeah. Yeah. And similar to how we think of Lemonade Insurance, the car insurance rollout to be like the big thing we're watching and waiting on. I think Rocket Lab, to me, the big thing I'm kind of waiting on, next big thing I'm waiting on to see is the Neutron rocket. That come to fruition, but that's a little bit further off. What's that, like 2024 or something?
I don't think it'll launch before 25, honestly.
Okay.
But hopefully we'll see a prototype. I think they even said they might try to get an engine done and maybe even test fired by the end of next year. But I think the whole vehicle altogether will be probably late 24, early 25, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
You know,
So
one interesting thing though, ARK Invest has. See, you're wearing the shirt today. I mean, they've been buying
yes.
Rocket Lab a lot. Like it seems like almost every day when I get these, daily activity reports, like they're adding Rocket Lab across their funds. So
They're
it's
probably got the
been,
best timing. They're gonna have the lowest average price of anyone for Rocket Lab. I mean, that's great for them.
yeah, we got in like pre-SPAC and we were feeling pretty good about that, and then
Yeah.
up until the whole thing went down. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
this could pan out really well for them.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's and I think the big you and I have talked privately about Rocket Lab on our thesis, and what I think we realize is a potential catalyst for Rocket Lab stock price that any investors in Rocket Lab maybe want to think about is is when Starlink gets floated as an idea more for an IPO. So Starlink, what was it supposed to be, 2023 or 2024, maybe an IPO or something to raise capital. So if Starlink
Mhm.
starts getting floated um, as an IPO idea, and valuations for Starlink get thrown around, investment banking, capital markets start saying, oh, and you see news reports, Starlink's going to have a 50 billion valuation or 100 billion, whatever, then I think you might see some excitement around the entire space industry, and you'll get closer eyes by professional institutional investors on Rocket Lab who start buying some of that up. And so I think similar to how like Rivian and Lucid kind of rode the bandwagon with Tesla's ride up, even though we don't think that they're worth the valuation increases they got. I think you'll see a valuation increase significantly for Rocket Lab once you have public markets putting evaluations on Starlink. But I think in this case, Rocket Lab is worth it. So I think that's one thesis we have about when Rocket Lab stock may or may not appreciate. Not investment advice, just
Yeah.
a
Well,
speculation.
yeah, and maybe one final thought on there, unless you got something else on it, but like we've been saying for a
Mhm.
while too that we think the whole market doesn't really understand who the winners and losers are going to be, and with the kind of news of Argo AI and
Mhm.
comma maybe there's some bad news there. It seems like a similar sort of dynamic where like
Yeah.
2 years ago, I met you and I would be like
Space
looking.
industry.
Well, we'd be looking at that chart. I don't know if you remember that chart that some consultant put together that had like Argo AI at like top of the pack in terms of like how great their technology was, and Tesla's at
Yeah.
like the very bottom, like least scalable and like least
Yeah.
efficient, or I forget what the metrics were. And it was like that's so dumb. That doesn't make any sense at all to kind of scale it that way. And I think
Yeah.
the at least looking at the relative valuations, so like for Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic and some of these other like Firefly, a lot of these other companies
Ad
that don't
Astra,
Adass,
Firefly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like for the most part, all these companies are like around $1 billion, plus or minus, 500 million or so. And then Rocket Lab's just over 2 billion. So it's like a very slight premium to all these. But like
Yeah.
if you look at how far ahead they are just in terms of their business model and their technology, they they deserve a lot more of a premium than
Yeah.
that in my mind. And on
Yes.
top of that, I think the overall space industry should be worth a lot more than SpaceX at, I don't know what it is, 130 billion, something like that, plus everybody else thrown together is maybe like another 10 to 20 billion. It's like the whole
Yeah.
market cap of that industry 5 years from now, 10 years from now is definitely going to be more than $150 billion. So the whole pie
Yeah.
is going to grow. And in my mind,
Yeah.
like Rocket Lab's relative sliver of that pie is definitely going to grow too. Well, not
Yeah.
investment advice, but so to me, like that's kind of like the broad strokes of the opportunity
Yeah.
here. And it just seems like from reading analyst reports on like Virgin Orbit, and I'm like that technology
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Like you're launching a rocket from a 747 and you think that's going to be like a scalable business model. It's just,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's some misunderstanding of the whole opportunity in this entire industry, because it is a new industry. So that might
Yeah.
take some time to pan out, but it's one of the reasons I think we feel so optimistic.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely spot on. A lot of good narratives and stories sold in the space industry, because so many sci-fi books are so exciting to us, next frontier. So many good stories sold about it, but how many companies are actually delivering on what their story is? And Rocket Lab is one of the few, along with SpaceX, obviously, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
all right. So yeah, we'll see everyone back next week. after, I saw someone in the comments, or someone on Twitter tagged me on Boomer Mama's tweet, I guess last night or something, about JP Morgan's analyst saying that there could be an 8% up day on the market tomorrow if the Fed only raises it 50 basis points instead of 75 basis points. So that's kind of like a white swan, potential event. I don't know if that would happen. 8% up on a day. That seems kind of incredulous, but
Yeah, that's suspiciously specific.
yeah, it's specific. Yeah, and there's probably no chance only 50 basis. Everyone thinks it's 75 basis points.
Yeah,
So
that would have to be one hell of a pivot to go to 50 basis points without really, um, kind of giving any indications that was going to be the case, other than that one kind of like
yeah,
private off the books, meeting
yeah,
that they had. So
yeah. Hopefully, when we get the next, like, what is it, the beige book? I forget the terms of all this, but hopefully, when the next record of their meeting, we'll see that it wasn't all unanimous for a 75 basis point increase. It seems like they've been suspiciously unanimous the last several increases without any dissenting voices. Hopefully, at least we'll see like some kind of dialogue versus everyone just agreeing with, 75 basis. I feel like that's the purpose of having a committee, is that you have discussions of differing views, and I don't think they've been having that lately. So
yeah, no, that's a good point. You've been saying that for a while, and I completely agree. It's a group thing. I think one of
yeah,
the things, even you and I, like, we don't always have the same point of view, and I think that's really helpful to kind of talk things out. So
absolutely.
I hope the
Yeah.
same thing would be happening at the Fed, where people would feel comfortable to say,
Yeah.
"Hey, we seem to be slaughtering the economy. We might want to slow down."
Yeah. You think someone would say that. So, all right. Well, we'll see what happens the next week, and have a good week, everyone. We'll see you next time.